to do a video response make a video in response to Martin Belam's article that was published today about No Man's Sky. First of all, I want to say thank you, Martin, for writing about games in your 40s, or for being a gentleman in his 40s and writing and putting forth some thought on gaming. I want to engage the folks who are in this cohort, 80s kids, because I think there's far too few of us who are putting forth thoughts and contributing to the conversation about gaming who are of that age group, and it's really nice to see that, because there are quite a few of us out there. I remember something like 7 or 8 years ago reading a statistic that the average age of gamers is 35 years old. So today that would mean to say that the average age of gamers is around 40. Actually, though, I haven't re-researched that recently, but I think that that's probably something has changed, and 40-somethings are not the average aged gamers because of the explosion that's taken place in terms of the gaming market as a whole, with young people joining the player base at the ages of something like 3 years old onwards. So I think that the average age of gamers, despite the fact that years ago it was 35, and it would then follow that it is now 40s, in their 40s, is not the case. I think that there just are far more 19-year-old gamers than any other age group, something like that. Point is, there are quite a few of us 40-somethings out there playing, continuing to play games despite family responsibilities, and it's nice to be able to have to see the kinds of opinions and wisdom that you see from folks of our age, and to also have the camaraderie of knowing that there are others out there sharing our experiences with games. So that's nice. This video is, amongst various things, is to reach out to folks like Martin, to let you know, to show admiration and appreciation, and to express friendship, and to eventually to contribute towards my agenda of getting folks in my age group to play League of Legends, which is an absolutely compelling experience, and it's a legitimate, competitive, compelling experience that is difficult to achieve in other forms of sports in real life. You can achieve it, but the sheer amount of that's a whole speech to give on the virtue, on the value presented by League of Legends. That's a whole thing. I will be I will evangelize by way of inserting various insights that I've gleaned over the 3 years of playing it into the videos that I make. So, at any rate, one of the purposes, again, of this video is to reach out to folks in their 40s and let them know, hey, there's something going on that you really don't want to continue missing out on, because it's wonderful. And so, part of the way to do that is to engage in conversation and to debate some of the points made by folks who are finding the time amongst their busy schedules to not only be able to play games, which is is quite an achievement in itself, but then to go even further to actually put forth some intelligent thoughts and opinions on the hobby, which is now actually has become a legitimate sport, and to be part of that scene is really something. So I want to say what I want to do in this video is debate the point about this idea that Martin puts forth in I think the first 2 or 3 pages of his very, very, very strong article, where he explains that there's value in No Man's Sky depending on what your needs are as a gamer, and for a lot of us who grew up in the 80s, it's put forth that our needs were what we desired growing up. There's this discussion about from Adams, that author that wrote those space books. I can't remember I'm not at my system right now, but this idea that if something isn't invented during the time in your life under the age of 35, that it isn't as important to you. Ultimately, is what the gist of the quotes are from the author Adams. And so yeah, there's some legitimacy to that idea, certainly. Well, there's some truth to it. It is actually a thing. For a lot of people. I read an article on psychology several years ago saying there are two types of people. There are those who continue learning throughout their lifetime, continue experiencing new things, continuing to find enrichment and fulfillment in completely new things, and throughout their lives. And then there are those who stop doing so around the age of 30. They stop listening to new music around the age of 30. They just continue throughout the rest of their lives with the same hobbies they had up until that point, and continuing to listen to the same music in their collection, those kinds of things. And that second group of folks who don't continue ingesting new experiences and creating new experiences for themselves make up the are the majority by a significant margin. So it's this tendency that people have to largely, for most people, to no longer be engaging and interested in and searching for new things after the age of 30. That sort of explains the author's quote about how anything invented in your lifetime after you're 35 seems unnatural. It's a shame that this is that there is such a strong tendency amongst people because it is largely explains it does explain the reason why there are something like 4 or 5 40-year-olds and up playing League of Legends. I mean, there's so few. There's like a handful of guys out there who, for whatever reason, it's typically because one of their adult children have turned them on to the game, in my experience, from what I've seen, the gentlemen I've met on the game. The general theme of a lot of my videos, I wanted to engage in Martin, in the discussion Martin has put forth, to contribute to the conversation, where there's the idea that we have certain values or certain needs as gamers, and finally returning to this, that we have certain needs as gamers based on our experience in life, the generation, which is dependent on the generation of which we are a part, of which we are members, and that our needs as 80s kids were to experience a fully realized world, or a largely realized world that is exotic and is voluminous enough that it allows for adequate exploration, such that we can feel this a level of satisfaction that we really weren't able to get with things like the Akari Warriors arcade cabinet at the local 7-Eleven, or Centipede at the Chucky's. Not that those weren't wonderful, really enjoyable experiences, but they certainly were not fully realized, imaginative fantasy realms that allowed for hours of exploration, such that we were able to get satisfied. So we grew up with this yearning and this need, and Martin has put forth that we largely have need for that. I want to counter the opinion, though, or I want to disagree in healthy and appreciative debate from a place of love and reaching out and for friendship, that we got plenty of that. My counter argument is that we got plenty of that, and everyone has gotten plenty of that. Far more than we really, well, not far more, but I'm exaggerating, but we've gotten quite a bit of it, enough. And it came in two ways, depending on your generation. So the newer generation has gotten that, and so have we as 80s kids, the older generation. We got it in a way that was probably a lot more exciting and enjoyable, because the way it took place and came about for us was because in our 40s growing up, what we experienced was really quite magical because we yearned we yearned for that fully realized world to explore, and all we really had when our gaming experience and in our early years was something like we had the Atari 2600 years type of generation where after school all our friends would come over and that was just amazing. But that was an extremely limiting experience in terms of immersion because of the quality of the hardware and the software. So for us, in order to be able to experience something with with some enjoyable audio and visuals that were really striking, it was gathering up nickels and dimes, bagging them up, and then riding our bikes up to the local cinema to play Gyrus and get that whatever that classical remix of that the music in that game was just it was totally nuts. It was amazing. It was probably the gameplay was really cool too, but that was an example of one of the early possibilities, avenues through which one was able to experience being swept away into another world by way of a game. And then following that we had an incremental progression of continually more developed game experiences that did allow us to escape and experience something otherworldly, or that's not the right word, to experience something fantastical. So it took the way it took place was with each iteration of advancing technology, we were able to experience more and more on a certain gradual path where the thirst was there was this experience that we all went through went on for several years through our youth and our teenagehood, wherein we were able to experience something that was one step above the last something like the prior year's game experience of audio and visual splendor and management of expectations issue, where our needs and desires as gamers were just barely met, such that we were able to obtain great enjoyment out of the latest offerings. And this experience of ours differs, I believe, certainly it differs from that of the, I guess, Generation Y and the Millennials, who were born at a time when either PlayStation 1 or something like Saturn or PlayStation 1, probably that generation, certainly by PlayStation 2 and Dreamcast, the PlayStation 2 and Dreamcast generation, were their fully realized worlds, fully realized 3D immersive worlds that one could explore for hours. That was something that folks Generation Y, I guess, and Millennials were born into, so they didn't have this experience where they really yearned for something, and the folks in Japan were able to create these things at the time. Japan, for us 80s kids, Japan was the source of gaming innovation and creation. And so what the younger generations, they really didn't experience this progression where their needs were just met as their needs continued to develop and become increasingly sophisticated and demanding. So I think that there was a different experience, and I think that the folks who people in the 40s cohort actually are fortunate to have been able to experience something that is more fundamentally enjoyable to the human experience, which is being throughout life there's reward that comes from hard work and patience and those kinds of things, because when things are just delivered to you without without any kind of waiting or any imagination and dreaming of what could be, then when it is delivered, or perhaps it's just those kinds of things like imagination and dreaming and yearning are just really forms of just suffering. So it can be argued one way that one experience is either one experience of the experiences has its virtues, certainly. At any rate, both the younger generation and us 80s kids have had plenty of fully realized immersive 3D worlds to explore. It's to the extent that I've actually not been able to continue playing those investing my time into those kinds of gaming experiences. I found ultimately that, in fact, it is the multiplayer online games that offer the only experience that is compelling enough for me to feel. It isn't really like some kind of an investment analysis. It isn't that that cerebral. It's more instinctual. It is simply comes about that I am drawn to playing the competitive, the games, which right now are League of Legends and Overwatch. These are the games to play. It is for me these competitive multiplayer online games, these particular two, that have been chosen, as I said, not necessarily, somewhat, actually largely from the standpoint of an investment analysis. You get to this age, you do make careful decisions on how to expend your time. It's simply that I've put in the time that's required. I made an investment. It was actually a carefully researched and thoughtfully considered choice to put in the tens of hours that was required in a month or a several week period in order to actually get hooked on League of Legends, to find what it is that people are just going so crazy about. So I did that, and it wasn't easy. It did take several, not forced, but I had to encourage myself to return to that game a couple of times, and at one point I even stepped away from it after putting in the first week or two of playing it like 8 or 9 times. I did step away from it for 6 months or so. I ended up returning to UT3 Warfare, which is that's a whole thing. That game was highly underrated, a very big marketing failure, marketing disconnect there. On a game that could have ultimately been the first really successful MOBA if the community was supported by Epic. And anyway, that's another video. And my other fellow 40-something-year-olds, I want to encourage you to look into these two biggest games in the world and the phenomenon of esports that's happening, that is within not even any more than 3 or 4 years going to outpace, just as the gaming industry outpaced the film industry back in whatever it was, 2008 or so. Esports is going to outpace what people call real sports, as if esports aren't real sports. Within nothing more than like 3 or 4 years. In fact, there are already studies and statistics coming out that the League of Legends World Championships, that's just called Worlds, actually had a viewership that was greater than something like the NBA Finals last year or something. Or no, like in 2013, there was a video recently about the debate on whether or not esports are real sports, and that statistic was fulfilled. So within 3 or 4 years, the user base, the player base, the viewership, and the revenues, and the general economy around esports, particularly around League of Legends and Overwatch, is going to outpace that of traditional sports. And I don't know how long this is going to take, but it's probably going to take a good decade for us here in the States to be able to go to a sports bar for a pizza and not have to be surrounded by 4 football games and a baseball game and a hockey. Those seasons probably don't coincide, but at any rate, we will be able to go into a sports bar and be. This video had a thesis. It would be that yes, generational perceptions are very powerful. However, the intrepid designer of lifestyle, the intrepid connoisseur of the human experience can cross these kinds of generational borders. So, when you in your 40s, when you do have the time to enjoy a Saturday afternoon or a late Thursday evening of gaming, if you are sinking your 1,350th hour into the latest expansion of Skyrim, I suppose Skyrim does have some sort of large. I know Skyrim has a huge community and all of that, but at any rate, if you are not playing, together in real time with the gaming community of millions of us, join me and the other 3 or 4 40-somethings and the other 20-something million players on League. We'd love to have you. I certainly